sound.
Okay. Okay, the class is now recording and I welcome, your daughter is there too, correct, Rosalie?
Meredith, she says she's
Meredith,
in sound.
so Meredith is your daughter, okay.
Mhm.
What
She's
do I do?
in Texas.
Ah,
If maybe she can click on the microphone little arrow
Me-
and see if she's got a speaker selected.
now Meredith, can you click on the microphone so you can participate and
Yes, I just had to adjust my sound settings. Sorry
Oh, there you
about
go.
that. Thank
there you go, I got you. I welcome aboard. Thank you all,
There you go.
and Happy, did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. How
Can
come
you
she
see
doesn't-
me?
No,
Well, because your camera's not on and
Okay, let's continue.
you're sharing your whole screen. That's
How
why
about
you're not
that?
seeing it.
Can you see me now?
they don't, can't come across the top. Can you put this up and this up so I can see her? I see you on another screen. Yes, I do.
Yeah, let's make it more.
Okay,
Okay,
okay, okay. So. Thank you very much, Jack.
No problem.
Yeah, I know we started to record. We'll now officially begin. I'm Jonathan Weil. So before we delve into the prophet Amos, I wanted to ask you if you had any questions or comments or annoyances or challenges or anything else about Jonah. I still have Alba on there. Okay.
I wanted to finish it. So
Yeah, if you
he's
could-
underneath the vine and he's happy, and then God sends a bug to kill the vine. He's all disturbed. And it's the only book, like you said last week, it's the only book that ends with a question, but the question is not aimed at Jonas. The question is aimed at us. The question is, and it's pretty good for Yom Kippur, because every year we go through the same routine. You act like a jerk all year long, and then you finally come to grips with yourself, and you have a day where you kind of, come to some kind of term with yourself and promise to try and do better. And with any luck at all, you do better. And the question is, why? Why would you want to try to do better? Every year you're going to go through the same rigmarole again. Every year you're going to, fall in the same pitfalls, and you're still going to be kind of half a jerk. And so you keep trying, but every year it's the same thing. You got to go back and do it again. And so the question really comes down to, everybody's sort of on burnout at the end of the year. And Jonas was on like a lifetime burnout. And God is kind of saying,
hello?
Oh, I think we lost Alba again.
I'm here. Did we lose Alba?
I think she cut out again.
So Alba's from Spain and she cuts in and out, but it's a delight having her. And she was expostulating on her frustration with Jonah.
I got it.
Let's go on.
Did anyone else want to say anything about Jonah?
No.
Challenges, anything perplexing, anything you disagreed with, took issue with?
No.
Bring a new insight to the issue? All right. So
That was Alba.
Uh,
Dropped off.
Alba's gone. Okay.
Come back.
Oh, so we're on the prophet Amos, and Amos the sheep herder. And I just wanted you to look at that first slide. Is that not unbelievable? That you
Mhm.
come into the room and you see that on PowerPoint? That's my much more than a techie and a geek, is my friend Jeremy, who's on the screen and saying hello. And he's responsible. He's responsible. He's my benefactor. He's responsible for making this stuff look good. And I really like that first slide. So I just want to give him my call out. and a thank you. And now and this is what he took it from, the second, yeah, yeah. The second slide, and here we have Jonah by a Renaissance artist, Paul Aiulo on the left, and then you all recognize the artist on the right, right?
Yes, Chagall.
Yes, it's Chagall. It's a lithograph. So it's, excuse me. Yeah, I'm sorry. Amos. Yes. Thank you, Susan. We're Amos on the left and Amos on the right among the sheep. It's a lithograph, so it's not in color, but you are correct, Chagall. And so this is just how famous Amos is. People have been quoting him through the ages for 2,000 years, our sages and others, and our modern day prophets. And on the left is Abraham Joshua Heschel, who's a great, now dead, but a great thinker on the prophets. And I think we can call him a modern sage, and a Martin Luther King on the right. And there's one of his most famous quotes, Martin Luther King. It was a signature line for him. But let justice well up like water, righteousness like an unfailing stream. But let justice well up like water, righteousness like an unfailing stream. Jonah is often called the prophet of justice.
Amos.
Sorry, Amos. When am I going to get off Jonah now? I have trouble enough remembering my wife's name, I guess. So I have a responsibility to tell you that a week ago, was it a week ago? Yes, Rabbi Ernesto Yatta from the Abraham Joshua Heschel Institute, I believe in Argentina, lectured on Amos. And these discussions are supposed to be based on and be stimulated by the lectures. It's okay, though, if you haven't. I suspect no one heard the Rabbi Yatta on Amos, did you?
No,
He is
No.
on tape if you want to. He is on tape if you want to do that. He's a big lover of Heschel. He runs the Institute for Heschel in South America. And I love this picture because to me, Heschel looks like a prophet. It's my favorite picture of him. And so there is Amos on the left and Heschel on the right. And so just to tell you a little bit about what Yatta said, Rabbi Yatta said. First, he located, of course, Amos in time. The Hebrew prophets are broken into former and latter, and then the latter are broken into major and minor. Major and minor is not a
It's only by the chapters. How many chapters they have?
yes, but major and minor is not a pejorative designation by saying they're not, to me, they're not lesser. I don't think to anybody they're lesser. They tend to be shorter. So they're all put together and they're called the minor prophets. And you can see, you remember, Joe, you know who the one missing from, oh no, there's Jonah. We did Jonah number 5 already. Whose prophecy consisted of 8 words. The 8 words were, if I can remember them correctly, 40 days and Nineveh, that's the capital of Syria, the great Nimrod city. 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. 7 words. 40 days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Okay, now that's his prophecy of 7 words versus hundreds of pages and 66 chapters for Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and even Amos is fairly long. I wanted to say something about that length, but it's gone out of my head. Well, yeah, we'll move on. Okay, so here were discussion questions on Amos that the Rabbi Yatta posed. They're interesting. You can see them. How do we situate Amos geographically and historically? And how does that situation affect our reading of his prophetic role? 2, describe the literary elements and the rhetorical aspects of his prophecies. 3, what is the core message of the prophecies and his? And 4, how does Amos understand the uniqueness of the Jewish people and God's relationship with Israel and the other nations? We'll end up answering a lot of that just by your discussing and talking about Jonah. And then my question, I sent you all a tease about Amos because it is one of my favorite books. But my question was, does Amos awake our moral conscience and consciousness to the injustices of our world, or are we by now inured and indifferent to them? I mean, in my day when I grew up, it was Vietnam, and we got kind of inured after a while, unfortunately. And does that happen to us with Ukraine? Does that happen to us bombarded as we are with media, social and otherwise? Yes, so how do we relate to him today? So that's the power and the challenge of Amos. You have to answer that for yourself. Now here I have Rabbi Yatta's insights. Now, any questions so far? Let's go back. Anybody have any questions or issues before we delve into it? Okay, more on Yatta, and this is Yatta through the eyes of Heschel, or Heschel through the eyes of Yatta. You know, that's his particular bias and his particular purview. So
Jonathan? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
No, sorry. I wanted to say something. But I'll wait.
No, go ahead.
Okay, it was just about the wonderful pictures. So graphic and telling and all, but they portray a white Amos. And we know that people at that time in that part of the world were not white.
He looks dark.
He looks a little bit swarthy.
Not in the first one. Not in the first one.
Not
but
in the first one, he's swarthy, but the others, yeah.
Yes. This is, well, this one anyway, yeah. I think the Renaissance would do that. It's a cultural and ethnic bias, but you're right. Thank you for pointing it out.
Sure.
And of course, here's Heschel and King.
Yeah.
Oh, this one, yes, he doesn't seem that swarthy, although it's in black and white. Okay. So here are his insights. I did learn a lot about Heschel. Many of you know this, but these are some of the things he said. They're not all from Heschel, but he pointed out that the prophets lead in biblical times. There are major leaders, a major force, and the rabbis lead in post-biblical times. Well, one's the Bible, and the second part is the Talmud, and what we're doing today, still commenting on biblical texts. So it's very interesting. I won't turn us into sages, but we're making commentary, which is what is intended in Judaism. And it's very beautiful in a way to be able to share and still share the biblical text today. And I think it's my personal opinion is that is probably the thing that's kept Judaism alive. It certainly isn't the power as a nation and a land. It's this questioning and this commentary for 2,000 years from the rabbi. Heschel, as you might expect, has a bias towards the prophets, not to rabbinical times. So you'll see that bias come out in the, do I have any chat?
Yeah,
No.
that was there. Sure.
Was there a question?
About teacher.
My hope is certainly that rabbis don't have an ivory tower connection to God. Yes, that's Rabbi Spitzer's commentary. Yeah, this is through the eyes of Heschel. It's not through the eyes of Jonathan Weil. And it's a good point. I was thinking of that myself. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that rabbis aren't immediate and feeling and spokespersons and direct connects to our living experience. We have rabbis who are heroes for that very reason. You have your personal heroes in your religions, and I have some in mine. So here's what a la Heschel, this is not a la Jonathan Weil, Yada said, more or less. So we have biblical Judaism is distinct from rabbinical Talmudic Judaism. We know that division. Prophets have direct connection with God. He actually used this word. Rabbis have more cerebral, intellectual, ivory tower connection, much less immediate. Heschel thinks something is lost from when we get post-prophets. Prophets have direct connection with people of the time. God reveals himself to us in history. Rabbis employ an Aristotelian, Hellenistic, Talmudic dialect. They have much less impact in the public square. Okay, those are more or less quotes from Ernesto Yata. We didn't have too much.
Does Yada think that Amos had an effect in the public square?
Do I think he did?
Do you think that Yada thinks that?
Oh yeah, yes, he does. I think he does. No, you don't think so?
No, I'm skeptical.
Yeah, okay. Prophets are at the heart of biblical Judaism. This I know is true just by how much trouble I see we have in people attending classes on prophets. At least my experience, even when I was teaching them, I don't know whether the prophets scared people away or there's some truth in this. Heschel and Yata believe they're at the heart of biblical Judaism, the second portion of Tanakh, but they are surprisingly understudied in the least known section of the Hebrew Bible. Rabbi, do you think that's true for you? You know, it's in terms of the public response to it.
But do I think that the prophets are the least studied part? Sure.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
With the exception of like a few very well-known verses.
Yeah, and then we can talk about what are the reasons for that. Anybody have any thoughts? I mean, maybe we'll have some thoughts after we get into the prophecies of Amos. What do you think?
What
Yaffa,
is
Sharon?
what is the question here?
The
what
question is why
did they
are
influence
the
us?
prophets less studied than the other sections of Tanakh?
It's a good question.
Tanakh. Why are they the least known section of the Hebrew Bible?
We studied
Well,
it.
let's hold that because I think it's an important question. Heschel's
It's because narratives are easier to understand than poetry.
yes, that's true. Poetry, the prophets tend largely to be in verse in poetry. Jonah wasn't, but Amos is.
Absolutely, a lot of poetry.
Yeah, a lot of poetry. We'll
Yes.
look at that. Heschel's sequel to the
Beautiful
prophets.
language.
This is Heschel's sequel to the prophets, is prophecy after the prophets. And then Heschel, some of his somewhat controversial comments he got, for example, Heschel insists Judaism is not a civilization. that comes from the Mordecai Kaplan book, Judaism as a Civilization. He was the really pioneer and inventor of Reconstructionist Judaism. He was very argumentative on this with lots of rabbis, so I included it because Rabbi Yatta included it. And then just a wonderful point that Heschel makes: the silence of the world is the face of injustice. The silence of the world is the face of injustice. You can see the poetic nature of Heschel. He's very eloquent. And then his most probably controversial and fascinating remark, also mentioned by Rabbi Yatta: everyone asks, where was God during the Holocaust? Heschel asks, where was man? It really turns it on its end. We could do a whole class or 2 or 3 on this. But think about that. And then also, one of my favorite quotes of Heschel is also, if I can find it here. It is. I don't. Where did it go? Well, I'll get to it. I'll get to it in due course. It's a fascinating one on. Oh, I remember now. He says, when I was a young man, I admired mostly in older people their cleverness. Now that I am an old man, I admire mostly their kindness. And I think that speaks to Heschel, and I think to most of us here probably. Now that I am an old man, I look for and I admire most the kindness of humankind. Now there's a basic structure of Amos. I don't want to bury us in this, but the first part is oracles or prophecies against the nations and against the Jews, against one. After he gets done with Damascus, Egypt, etc., the 6 of them, it's followed by a condemnation against Judah, where he was actually from, and then Israel. And this means Judah, the southern kingdom, and Israel, the northern kingdom. And he goes on in depth about that. And then chapters 3 to 6 also contain oracles specifically against the women, wealthy, and the people. And then there are 5 symbolic visions of doom. And they're the plague of the locusts, a fire, a plumb line, figs, basket of figs, summer fruit, and destruction of temple worshipers. Then there's a personal confrontation with Amaziah, the head priest of Bethel, which is in the northern kingdom. Bethel is in Israel, is in the northern kingdom. And then there's a conclusion, and thank heavens he concludes, but you'll see throughout, there's a lot of vision of hope and consolation, even right next to preceding and following the days of the doomsday visions that Amos prophesizes. Any questions at this point? I really want to get to the text,
Okay, so let's get to the day.
but let's do that where I can really, well, this was a map just to show you, and it's I learned that phrase from Professor Burke, but didn't Abba Eben say that? Somebody said that who was very famous, a good neighbor in a bad neighborhood. Professor Burke, one of our professor historians and heroes from Union College, who lectures quite a bit for Agudah Ahim, often says that. You can see Israel, the kingdom of Israel in the blue. This is not the whole Israel now. It's not called Israel. It's the kingdom of Israel in the northern kingdom. Oh, let me point to it with my, see it right there, Samaria, the capital, and Jerusalem, the capital of the kingdom of Judah, and then surrounded by the Philistine states. There's Gaza, the Phoenician states, the modern day Lebanon, Tyre, the famous city of Tyre.
Oh,
Tyre's existed for all time and still
Oh.
exists today. The Damascus, Syria area. And then Amman is the capital of Jordan, and the kingdom of Ammon and the kingdom of Moab and some of the kingdom of Edom, because you can see Petra down there, are all part of Jordan today. Okay, so that's just to orient you to these are the nations, the so-called enemies and nations that the oracles are delivered about. Before he doesn't leave out, and that's one of the great things about Amos, I think. He doesn't leave out his fellow folks, his fellow Israelites. He condemns the kingdom of Judah and then the kingdom of Israel.
Well, his whole
that-
point is to condemn the kingdom of Israel. It's just he condemns them in the context of condemnations of everyone.
Yes,
Right?
that's
he was
true
a prophet.
because
He was a prophet to Israelites, not a prophet to Moabites.
right. But one of the important things about what you're saying is that God is the God of all nations. So not just of the Israelites. So it fits with, taking his turn to criticize the other nations as well. Because I think it's very important that here Jonah is not, Amos doesn't exempt the people of Israel for any or of Judah for any special status, for their quote unquote chosenness. That's important. This was the kingdom, the ruler Jeroboam, who Amos sort of preached, we think, in the last 10 years, or not quite, of Jeroboam's reign. It was a time, we know this from history, of tremendous decline of Assyria, of prosperity in the kingdom, of expansion of territory, commerce, wealth, and what goes with wealth, we know from every civilization that's ever existed, and from the abuse of wealth and power, social injustice and inequality and moral decadence. And so I tell you that because that's what Amos will deal with. He's, as I say, he's often called the prophet of social injustice or justice. This is my,
say something. When you showed the map, it shows you things haven't changed. It's the same map.
I know,
Again,
yes.
Israel is surrounded by all these countries as enemies.
Yeah, the names have changed, but not the quote unquote enemies. Yes, it's been that way for 2000.
As they say, Manishtana, what has changed? Nothing.
Yeah. It's been that way for we're talking almost 3,000 years, right?
Yep.
So here's some other primer information about Amos from this is from me, not from Heschel or from Rabbi Yatta. It's probably the first prophetic book of the Bible to be written. It's like most of the books of prophecy, it's largely in verse, not prose. Jonah was much more a narrative short story. very little poetry except for his prayer, Thanksgiving prayer. Amos is older contemporary of the prophets Hosea and Isaiah. He's active during the time of King Jeroboam. We just said that. He's a sheep herder and sycamore dresser. A sycamore dresser is a somewhat interesting term. We think it means that he clipped, he snipped, he
Right.
nipped the fruit.
To ripen, to help it
ripen.
ripen.
So you'd have faster ripening, yeah. But
Right.
I think it shows his humble. He's not an aristocrat, or which Isaiah probably was. He's as opposed to many other prophets. He's a man of simple, humble origins, but highly educated. You can see from his words.
Right.
He's from Judah, the southern kingdom, but preaching in the north. We already said he's called the prophet of social injustice. His name in Hebrew, very appropriately, means the burden bearer.
Right.
He carries a heavy, weighty burden. What is the name? What is the word in Hebrew for burden?
Omes is a burden. Amos.
Amos is a burden. Okay.
Carry-
Modern day.
He's carrying the burden. He's
Yeah,
already.
he's carrying the burden. He's a modern day prophet preacher, like modern day prophets and preachers like Martin Luther King have quoted him repeatedly. Here's my take on his central idea. The book of Amos is that the central idea is that God puts his chosen people on the same level as Israel's surrounding nations. God is the God of all nations and peoples. Israel is not exempt from punishment because of any special status. God is the God of moral righteousness. He expects the same moral and ethical conscience and consciousness from all of us. Social injustice and idolatry are intolerable. And Amos's emphasis on social injustice comprises concern for the orphan, widow, poor, the needy, that repeats throughout his prophecies, and how they're mistreated in his day and in the days of King Jeroboam, a day of prosperity. Who are the ones that get the short stick in the days of prosperity? It's true to this very day. It's the needy. Amos is the first to use the phrase, the motif, the day of the Lord, the day of the Lord, the day of doomsday, the day of God is at hand, signifying the end of days. And then I like very much, he doesn't say it, but I like this idea of the repentant remnant. Prophets will talk about, like Isaiah, will talk about a remnant will remain, a remnant for hope, a remnant of goodness, a remnant of good people who God will preserve and save in his covenant with the Jews and with Israel. So the hope and the possibility of repentance and redemption is always at hand, even for a remnant, no matter how small, of his repentant people. That goes throughout the prophecies. Now I wanted to look at a very controversial part of Amos. Let's start with that, which is slide 32. Where is, oh, we don't have the numbers now, do we? So that would be, let's have, this is a very controversial part of Amos that you'll see when we get to it, that is still argued today, and has over 2,000 years been discussed. Can we have a reader there for the first part? Happy, you want to read the first page?
Started and lack of food.
Oh, or yet you did not turn, yes, and yet you did not turn back to me.
Okay. And lack of food in all your settlements, and yet you did not turn back to me. I therefore withheld the rain from you 3 months before the harvest time. I would make it rain on one town and not on another. One field would be rained upon, while another, on which it did not rain, would wither. So 2 or 3 towns would wander to a single town to drink water, together with your captured horses. And I made the stench of your armies rise in your very nostrils, yet you did not turn back to me, declares the Lord. I have wrought destruction among you, as when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. You have become like a brand plucked from burning, yet you have not turned back to me, declares the Lord. Assuredly, because I am doing that to you, ever so will I act toward you, O Israel. Prepare to meet your God, O Israel. Behold, he who formed the mountains and created the winds and has told man what he wished is, who turns blackness into daybreak, who treads upon the high places of the earth. His name is the Lord, the God of hosts.
Okay, it's rather lengthy. There is what would you think is controversial in this? Any ideas? I mean, you've gotten the typical wrath and criticism throughout. The yellow, yet you did turn back to me, is just to show you what we all know from biblical narrative as well, even though this is in poetry, is the repetition.
Repetition, yeah.
Repetition is a key. Okay. Let me tell you this. It is the controversy is a fascinating one, and it revolves around be prepared to meet your God, O Israel. What does that mean to you? Prepare to meet your God, O Israel.
Jonathan,
Yes.
which verse again is prepared to meet your God?
It would be 4:12.
Right.
It would be almost prepare to meet your God, O Israel.
Could you actually translate in the Hebrew? It says, prepare likrat Elohecha Yisrael, to go toward your God. Could we translate it like that? Meaning to open
Ah,
up your hearts. So I don't necessarily care for that translation.
well, you're pointing out, yes, and you're pointing out that's good, because I like your translation better. Prepare to meet, to go toward your God.
Yeah, like on Shabbat, we say, Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, toward, we go toward.
So
It's the same
you're,
word.
yes, so you're touching on what is the basis of a controversial interpretation here. What do you think most people say about prepare to meet your God, O Israel? Prepare to,
That you're gonna die.
yeah, it's a negative. Rosalie, did you have anybody else? Yeah, I could make it simple and say, how many think this is a positive and how many say it's a negative? And when I do this in my classes, it's really 100% say it's a negative, because they're used to this kind of language in the prophets. Prepare to meet your God, O Israel.
Yeah.
Okay, so besides that translation, which was very good, because that retranslation by Sharon, which may provide a clue to that, to the positivity, not the negativity of that statement. There are some other things about that. Play devil's advocate. How do you argue for that being positive and not negative? This is not the common view, even today.
Well, let's see now.
And while you're thinking,
Yeah.
Sharon, go ahead, but, and anybody else chime in here.
Jonathan?
yeah.
It
Happy.
seems to me that Sharon's translation makes more sense in the context where you have the repeated phrase, and yet you turned your back on me, and yet you
Yes.
did not turn back to me.
And
And
now-
he's saying now turn toward
Oh,
me. It
oh.
makes more
And-
sense to me
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Excellent. So,
yeah,
so
that's great. That's
look at-
great, Marguerite.
that's great. You have the opposite. That's super duper. It makes more sense.
Yeah, and I
Pe-
think within the context of what we are taught as Jews to do teshuvah, so likrat then makes sense in the way I see it, in the way I understand it, because it provides the opportunity. Amos as prophet is not doom and gloom, but I like to see a ray of light and hope.
The doom and gloom is all around it, and I can see why people slip into that error. What I call it, I really think it's a misreading. Slip into that reading. It's a common reading today, and
Yeah.
was 2,000 years ago, except for Rashi. Rashi got it right, and
What
that was
did
a
Rashi?
1,000 years ago. He said this is not a negative.
Okay,
And he, and you know why? Another reason people get it right is because the normal doomsday vision is it says, prepare not to meet your God. It says, prepare for the
Towards you, God.
what?
what?
It's towards you, God.
Chore,
Yeah,
that's what
what
I
is
said.
the-
Not.
yeah, but-
Not.
But
Yes.
what's the negative? If we turn it into a negative, and it is used over and over again in all the prophecies, prepare for the, as a warning, that prepare for doomsday, prepare for the day of your God, the
Right.
day of the Lord. That is, there's no day here. Meat is much more, here's another reason I would argue for the Strasbergian reading there. Meat is a much more intimate word. It's a word of like know, understand. It's a very, and turning to, that's a word almost like Shema, hearken, has all those meanings. This is intimacy.
But you know what?
Uh,
It's not
and-
a true translation. I don't know. Here, it says, "Hikon likrat Elohecha." Get ready towards you, God. It doesn't say prepare to meet. I don't understand.
Right, Yafa, you and
Well,
I.
towards, if you
One.
go towards your God, you're meeting him.
Yeah.
Meet is not a negative word. I mean, but the way I was reading it, we could prepare to meet your God, but it's not prepare for the day of the Lord. See, that goes throughout almost, and all the prophets. So yeah, I could still live with meat and argue the humanity and opposite, the positivity of that word even. And then there's something else. You always should look what comes before and what comes after. Happy you did an excellent reading. You got several verses, at least 12 verses of yet you did not turn back to me with all these horrors. Yet you did not turn back to me. Hence, finally, as Sharon and most of you have said, we're now going to turn back to you. It's called doing teshuvah. We're going to return to God. We have a chance to return to God at least. So we're going to prepare to meet your God, to turn toward you. Now, you read excellently before, Now let's look what comes after. Read that for us, what comes after. Meredith, you want to do that? The verse 13 from Behold?
Sure. Behold,
It's not, oh, okay.
he who formed the mountains and created the wind, and has told man what his wish is, who turns blackness into daybreak and treads upon the high places of the earth. His name is the Lord, the God of hosts.
Okay, what do you think of that? How does that support our positive and not a negative reading? I believe it does.
Positive because it's saying that God, that everything is chaotic and awful around, but God is not dead. God is present, but you need to find God. You need to get yourself ready to go locate and draw out the light through the cracks.
Yeah, nicely put. Yes, Sharon?
May I ask a question to Rabbi Spitzer if he's there?
I don't think Rabbi Spitzer? No, I think.
Okay, then I'm gonna give it to the Rabbani Yafa. Yafa,
Okay,
what is the translation of is it ma shecho? L'adam ma shecho. I mean, should that be translated as what his wish is?
Which pasuk?
It's pasuk.
Ed has told man what his wish is.
It's Yud Gimel. So is his wish shecho? You see, it says L'adam in Yud Gimel, Yafa.
So what is the question? I don't understand.
The question is, what do you think of the translation? Because I'm not sure. It's verse 13, as you see in the slide here. The 1, 2, 3, 4th, the fourth sentence down from Prepare to Meet Your God, and which reads, and has told man what his wish is. Now, so I'm asking you, is there another way to translate? In Hebrew, it's ma shecho, ma shecho. What is his what?
Secho, the conversation, sicha.
Oh, it's from Sicha. It's a Sicha. Does that imply wish, or is a Sicha is between two or more people, right?
Right.
So we don't know that that's wish.
Okay, yes, how does that bear upon the meaning of the whole for you about the positivity or negativity that I'm trying to get?
It would be positive again because it would be a relationship. It would be a relationship, like I'm talking to you.
God and man, yeah.
This is, what kind of God is this in verse 13? He's not the God of, help me, just as Meredith was saying, this is the God of what?
Of the nature.
Not only nature, what did God
Israel.
do?
The God of light.
And the God of Genesis 1. God of creation.
Creation.
It's not the God of destruction that is follows prepared to meet your God, to go toward your God, to know your God. It's the God of construction. It is the God of creation. Creation can be turned on its side and made horrible. You know, you're going to destroy the world. But here it's a constructive creation. He who formed the mountains and created the wind and has told man what his wishes, or converse, he who turns blackness into daybreak and treads upon the high places of the earth. His name is the Lord, the God of hosts. Even that's positive. So you have just turned 2,000 years of argumentation on its ear. Thank you. Susan in the background. That's it's unbelievable to me that why that's still a a controversial passage. Let me just show you, though, what we mean by these days of, oh, I don't have the slides here, the numbers, wow. Let me show you. Here. So here's a day of doom. Here's the day of doom, the doomsday vision versus what we just read. Amos 6:8. Who would like to read that? Marty, Sharon?
No, he can't, sure.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. The
Yeah,
servant.
yeah,
You want to go and read?
sure. My Lord God swears by himself. I loathe the pride of Jacob, and I detest his fortresses. I will declare forfeit city and inhabitants alike, declares the Lord, the God of hosts. If 10 people are left in one house, they shall die. And if someone's kinsman who is to burn incense for him comes to carry the remains out of a house, and he calls to the one at the rear of the house, are there any alive besides you? He will answer, no, none. And he will say, hush, so that no one may utter the name of the Lord. For the Lord will command, and the great house shall be smashed to bits, and the little house to splinters.
Okay, all right. So that's the doomsday vision, which occurs here before. Look at the screen. Are you better than those kingdoms, or is their territory larger than yours? Here's a comparison of the other nations, right? Yet you ward off a day of woe and convene a session of lawlessness. That's the day of the Lord. Here's another one. Look at the bottom of the screen, 5:16. Ah, you who wish for the day of the Lord. Why should you want the day of the Lord? It shall be darkness, not light, as if a man should run from a lion and be attacked by a bear, or if he got indoors, should lean his hand on the wall and be bitten by a snake. Surely the day of the Lord shall be not light, but darkness, blackest night without a glimmer. Okay, that's the contrast of what we read in prepare to meet or go toward the Lord your God. You've been much better readers than a lot of interpreters for 2,000 years, but you can see how they fall into that because they somehow get prepared to meet the day of the Lord. They're thinking prepared to meet prepare for your reckoning. It does not mean that. All right. How many have you had experience with reading Amos before, any of you, or before this class began because you knew it would be on Amos? No, that's fine.
I read it in.
I know Sharon, you've read some, and Yafa, you've read some of it, right?
No,
I learned it in school.
Yeah.
But can I make a few comments?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe it should be summarized. I don't know. First of all, Amos uses beautiful, beautiful language.
Yeah.
And he uses a lot of his sentences are made into songs even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're so poetic. But
Right.
also very important.
You know, I'm not gonna fail to get to that poetry.
No, but I want to
since that's my field. Go ahead.
Okay, I want also to say a few more things. First of all, it's very important that he was a shepherd, because a shepherd's life was very, very difficult. He had to be very, very compassionate person. He had to watch his sheep. He would go into, into the fields with them and worry about the weak sheep. It's an unbelievable job to be a shepherd. And I think
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, I was
I
going to
think what
start,
made him
I was
is
going to
what
start
makes
with that.
him
Go
compassionate
ahead.
person. And the other thing that I want to say is that to me, the importance of prophets is also, first of all, I think they were the moral conscience of the people because there was a lot of corruption, like in every nation among the priests. And this, so
Right.
the prophets were the moral conscience of the faith. But what I wanted to say is I also judge them by the influence they had on our life. And I read someplace, I don't know, but you know that the 7th day of mourning that you sit Shiva, it's from one of the sentences. I'm looking for it. I think it's the one, the 8th one. He says, "Ve'hafachti chagechem," I will turn your holidays into mourning. And when they say holiday, they mean the main holiday that are 7 days, like Pesach and
Yeah,
Sukkot.
yes, that's,
So-
that,
So I also judge prophets by how much they influence our life and what they did to us. So this is what I wanted to, I don't know, but many know that the idea of mourning 7 days comes from Amos.
yeah, that's excellent. All
Wait,
excellent.
Sucha, which chapter and verse? Yeah.
What?
From the morning, 7 days.
Chapter, I just found it. It's chapter 8. Yeah. And Pasuk 10.
Okay, thank you.
8, 10,
"Ve'hafachti chagechem le'even." I will turn all your holidays into mourning, and kol shirechem, and all your songs into mourning songs. Let you, and then how you dress for when you mourn, you dress with the sacks and simple clothes. So we think that this habit, this custom comes from Amos.
okay. Oh, yeah, shall not the earth. I'm a little confused. What is it? Chapter 8, verse 10?
In
Yeah, I will
chapter
turn your, yes, bottom of my
8,
page here.
10,
I will-
10.
I will
Verse-
turn your festivals into mourning and all your songs into dirges. I will put sackcloth on all loins and tonsures on every head. It's a day of doom vision because it starts very apocalyptic, right? I will make the sun set at noon.
It
I
is a-
will darken the earth on a sunny day.
Your
Wow.
holidays, it means the major holidays, like Pesach is 7 days, Sukkot is 7
Right.
days. So this is where we get the 7th day of Shiva.
Right. That's good. Anyone, any other questions? I'm going to show you, since I keep insisting that it's very relevant to today, Amos.
I think this is what we look for always, right?
Right. It's absolutely. Why bother with it if it isn't? Here's an interesting relevance to today, I say, or to a civilization that's turned morally corrupt and decadent. So they lie on ivory beds, lolling about on their couches, feasting on lambs from the flock and on calves from the stalls. They hum snatches of song to the tune of the lute. They account themselves musicians like David. They drink straight from the wine bowls and anoint themselves with the choicest oils, but they are not concerned about the ruin of Joseph. So that's just a picture. Maybe I've seen too many Roman films and Roman depictions of decadence, but I think of Rome here, but of any civilization that's sort of at its end. It's end of days unless it gets with the program. Let's see, there was something else here. Let me give another, there's an even better example. Here's a good one. Relevance to today. Assuredly, because you impose a tax on the poor and exact from him a levy of grain, you have built houses of hewn stone, but you shall not live in them. You have planted delightful vineyards, but shall not drink their wine. For I have noted how many are your crimes and how countless your sins. You enemies of the righteous, you takers of bribes, you who subvert and negate the cause of the needy.
Pontificate.
Any questions, comments?
Jonathan, is this directed at the Northern Kingdom?
Yeah, this is, it's largely preaching against the Northern Kingdom. The bulk of the prophecy is against Israel. After he tends to the nations, he says, you folks are not exempt. And he really, naturally, his emphasis is going to be on Israel, which is the Northern Kingdom. And
I
which
read
will-
someplace,
Yeah,
I
go
read
ahead.
someplace that a lot of this, that some of this means that because they had a great calling from God, that more is expected of them than the surrounding nations or their
Yes.
enemies.
Yes, right on. Because of their chosen status, and what we mean here is their covenant with God at Sinai. It's called a really a conditional covenant, because there's another kind of covenant, which is a covenant of gift, but this is largely from Torah and throughout. It's the covenant that's conditional upon your behaving yourself. Otherwise, God will remove his goodness to man and destroy him. So this is a covenant from Sinai. It's a covenant of the law, and it's even a greater responsibility for the one who makes that covenant to behave, and we know what that's Torah about, in a moral, ethical
High expectancy.
way. Yes. Comment there?
Yeah, I have something, I have a question or a comment maybe. But
Go ahead.
Yafa, I thought Yafa wanted to say something.
Yes, go ahead, Jaffa.
I said, I love his description of the wealthy people. Like his famous one is, he describes the rich women, Parot HaBashan, they're the cows of Bashan. They don't care about the poor, all they care about themselves. His language is like unbelievable.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Gosh.
It's gorgeous. Let me just show you what Jaffa is quoting. Amos 4, Amos 4. Hear
Yes.
this word, you cows of Bashan, on the hill of Samaria, who defraud the poor, who rob the needy, who say to your husbands, bring and let's carouse. My Lord God swears by his holiness. Behold, here comes the day. Days are coming upon you when
Very
you are
powerful.
carried off in baskets, and to the last one in fish baskets, and taken out of the city, each one through a breach straight ahead, and flung on the refuse heap, declares the Lord. And flung, you believe that, how it ends? And flung on the refuse heap? Is there a greater vision,
Unbelievable.
prophecy, oracle of doom?
Yeah.
Sharon, you wanted to say something, yeah.
Yeah, just put it out there. It's awfully upsetting to think that there is a correlation between people behaving as they do and doom and gloom. That doom and gloom will come to them.
right?
And then, yeah, so that's awfully upsetting about, if there is, I mean, it seems like maybe some readers of the prophets just infer that there is a correlation, but is there a correlation? So that's one thought.
Wait a minute, is there a correlation between sin and your behavior and your moral decadence
Well, wait
and
a-
corruption?
wait a- Well, you know what, we could talk about, you know, extreme multimillionaires today and the lifestyles of the rich and famous, yet a lot of those rich and famous actually, well, maybe it's for tax purposes, so for ultimate nefarious reasons, but they do give to, not all of them, but a lot of them try to make this world a better place with their money. So so I just think it's beautiful. His poetry is gorgeous and sentiments are gorgeous. And of course they're, wait, I'm going to stop there with that. And then I'm thinking about if one does read into this with correlation, then you could see how easy it is to buy into Calvinism.
To buy into what?
Oh, yeah, because if you do good works, you get to heaven.
Well, yeah. So I think, you know, back then, how did people hear it? Did they just hear it as, you know, poetry? Or was he trying to say, you know, I don't know, but here's what it seems like to me.
Mhm.
But then again, yeah, anyway.
Okay, and before I get to the poetry, I want to show you two things I've noticed from my study. I've been reading a lot about the Greeks and a lot about Christianity, and so here's what here's my insight. I think it could be right. Know thyself is the essence of Socrates and the Greek philosophy. Have self-awareness. I believe in that. You know by now, after one class even, and some of you have suffered through more than one. That's I take a psychological view of the world, a psychological mode, a psychological bent, a feeling bent towards, you know, what does this mean for my self-awareness and self-exploration? I think the Hebrew mode, the Hebrew frame is different from know thyself. Well, what would it be? This is not a trick question.
The Hebrew would be, who are you? Miata, or bifnei miata omed. Who are you?
No, who are you is still know thyself.
Maybe
Yeah,
it's
but
in that.
I think it's stick to the know. Know thyself or know.
God.
Yes, you got it. That's my reading. It's know God, because where does self-understanding and awareness come from? It is coming from and through your understanding of God, hearkening to God, Shema, listening, understanding, taking it into your heart. That's the message of, and sometimes I think about, you know, am I a faithful and good Jew? Because I put the emphasis perhaps on the wrong syllable. I put the emphasis on know thyself. There is a lot of know thyself in Torah, right? I mean, there's tremendous experiential self-exploration.
Yeah,
But-
there's one difference between the Jews and the Greeks. The Greeks had gods, but their gods didn't care about people. They were,
Excellent.
You made sacrifices, they wouldn't get angry at you, try to stay out of their way, but they didn't care about you. Our God wants us to be virtuous and gives us a set of laws which we obey in order to be virtuous. And that's the difference between the two cultures.
Yeah,
Thanks,
no, you're
yeah.
absolutely right. Now, we're at the whims and the mercy of the gods if we're in the Greek culture. They don't give a hoot about man. There's many lines about that. We are the sport of the gods. That comes from the Greeks.
I just want
With
to
the
ask
Greek.
Yafa,
Yes.
where does Bifnei Miata Omed come from?
It's in
What is that, Sharon? Share
Oh,
that?
Yafa will tell you.
the Mishnah. It's not in the Torah.
Okay. It
Okay.
means know before whom you stand. In other words,
Oh,
whatever.
okay,
you
that,
do.
well, that, know before whom you stand is God, know thy God. Yeah, fits, that's right, that's the incredible, Stephen Burke often, when he lectures in synagogues, he says, I know before who I stand, believe me, on the
Maybe-
bema here.
maybe that
I
was a
stand
joke.
before God.
Oh, does he go on to say that, or was it like before the audience knows what they want? Never mind, bad joke.
Yeah, no, he, he, I think that melds right with what I'm saying. Know thy God, know before whom I stand, my God. All right, now here's what I want to say about an insight I had on Christians versus Hebrews. I took this, Happy, give us a little bit of the Lord's Prayer. That's where thy will be done comes from.
I will-
The Lord, help me out.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Okay,
Give us this day
Well-
our daily bread, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah, great. So I was thinking about that. It's a beautiful prayer.
Yes.
It comes out of the Christian Testament. And thy will be done, perhaps our most favorite, our most famous prayer and psalm by comparison is Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. Also, but what a metaphor that is. And this fits in with Yafa's point about Amos as shepherd too. But what I want to ask here is, this is a toughie. I've thought a long time about it. Thy will be done is, as it on what's the next line?
On earth as it is.
On
on-
earth
on-
as it is in heaven.
Okay, what is it about thy will for the Hebrew? What's the completion of thy will there? It's not thy will be done. God's will be done. It's not really that emphasis. There's something more involved with man himself and what we have to do as and I may be off on this. This is just my take and my crack at it.
Does anybody know where the Lord's Prayer comes from in the New Testament?
Yeah, it's twice. It's twice in the Christian Testament. And Jesus was so it comes from there, and it comes from what Jesus said according to the apostles. I don't know the exact two places, but
Okay, I was looking for it because I'm gonna recommend, can everybody see this book? Yes, no?
No.
What is
No?
it?
What is it?
It's called The Jewish Annotated New Testament by Professor Amy Jill Levine. She's at Vanderbilt University, and I recommend this to all. The Jewish Annotated New Testament. She is actually, she belongs to my nephew's synagogue, which is Orthodox, but she herself is non-sectarian. And she actually is the professor of Christian theology at Vanderbilt at their divinity school.
She's Jewish. She's Jewish.
And in the undergraduate, she is professor of Jewish studies, and she's a colleague of Mark Bratler and the current scholars in Jewish history. Anyway,
What's the name of the book? Can you repeat it?
yes, the Jewish Annotated New Testament.
Okay,
And so, and she also wrote something about Jesus and the parables. That's another book of hers. And the Vatican has allowed her to come and lecture. They have brought her on as a lecturer to the Vatican. And she says that because of Jesus, she is a better Jew. So,
okay,
The name Levine?
yes, Amy Jill. AMY
okay.
and JILL, Amy Jill Levine. Yes, check her out on YouTube. On
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay,
Jonathan,
yeah, go ahead.
for Sharon's edification, I
Yes.
just looked it up on the computer.
Yes.
The Lord's Prayer is in Matthew, verse 6,
Yeah.
chapters 9 through 13,
Okay. Thank you.
and
Thank-
Luke,
Yeah.
chapter 11,
Yeah.
verse 2 to 4.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. So it does come right out of the Christian Bible and through the words of Jesus, according to Luke and according to Matthew. All right, let me just come back to this because I think it's important. I want to contrast thy will be done with what do we do with thy will? Here's what I have written here. Thy will be done versus thy will be changed. Isn't that the message of the prophets here? We're not fixed with God's will be done. We have the capacity. We're not puppets on strings. We have the capacity to change. So I posed the question, when the lives of others are at stake, I got this really from Amos. When the lives of others are at stake, what utters the prophet? Well, in Amos 7:3, he says, the Lord repented concerning this. He turned away from it. That's the plague of the locusts devouring Israel. It shall not be. It shall not come to pass. It's still the Lord's word, but man has a chance here. Thy will be changed. It shall not be, said the Lord. Amos 7:3. So I don't know. That was my take on it. Maybe I'm off. Maybe I'm off on that. But,
7:3.
I have to say, I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of God repenting. And I wonder what the source text is and whether there are alternate interpretations. But it seems so, what's the word?
that God has to change his mind when he's omnipotent and all seeing and all powerful.
I mean, it's this God concept that hews closely to this idea of man in God's image. You know, I guess my own, I have problems with that. And I wonder if the source text could be interpreted differently than repented in a way that changes the God concept from what this expresses.
What is the word in the, would you look to Amos 7:3? Here, I will go to it. I don't have the Hebrew. I
Okay.
don't have the Hebrew, but Yaffa, would you look at Amos 7:3?
Yeah. Okay, I've got it.
Okay,
the
the
word-
Lord here's relented. And I don't think that's a
Relented.
misprint. Does that help, Madeline? I mean, Meredith? The Lord relented concerning this.
Absolutely.
It shall not come to pass. So this vision of Amos is about the locusts, the plague of the locusts. The prophet, let's read that. Meredith, read it from, this is what my Lord showed me.
This is what my Lord God showed me. He was creating a plague of locusts at the time when late sown crops were beginning to sprout. The late sown crops after the king's reaping. When it had finished devouring the herbage in the land, I said, "Oh Lord God, pray forgive. How will Jacob survive? He is so small." The Lord relented concerning this. "It shall not come to pass," said the Lord.
So the Lord listens as he has to Moses and Abraham before Amos. He listens to the challenge of Amos, who says, "Oh Lord," and you read that so well, "Oh Lord God, pray forgive. How will Jacob survive? He is so small." So in response, it's the Lord's will be done. No. Forget it. I'm not changing. There's going to be a plague. There's going to be a day of doom. No, the Lord relented, repented. I must have got that from another text too. The Lord relented concerning this. It shall not come to pass. Yeah. Now I just want to understand what, Meredith, your problem with that, whether it's relented or repented, you still have a problem, right?
No, relented is much better.
Oh, okay.
And how about Yafa?
And yeah, what's the word, Yaffa?
Yeah, the word is
The
Nichem.
word of relented is nicham.
Yeah, and is that comforted? The Lord
like
comforted
In a way,
himself?
it's a little bit like he changed his mind a little bit.
And,
Okay,
Yafa,
so
does it have anything to do with he comforted himself because
Yes,
he was?
nechama.
yeah,
And, okay, so
Good,
this is a different thing then. It's got an additional nuance.
yeah. He changed his mind. He turned away and turned towards man.
Yes,
God
Yeah.
softened.
And
Yeah.
we call it nevuat nechama. It's prophecy of comfort.
yes.
Yes, and I have to tell you how much hope there is. It's right. Look, I put the hope in green. There's hope all through Amos. And of course, the final great hope is we'll take turns reading the very end, where it's a different order, a different vision, a different reality, not the day of doom that is being, it's not as in 9:8. Behold, the Lord God has his eye upon the sinful kingdom. I will wipe it off the face of the earth. That's 9:8. There we
But-
go again. But I will not wholly wipe out the house of Jacob. The hope following it. Now, back to the doom. For I will give the order and shake the house of Israel through all the nations. All the sinners of my people, blue is day of doom. All the sinners of my people shall perish by the sword who boast. Never shall the evil overtake us or come near us. because we're the chosen ones. We're special. No, no, no. But here's the gorgeous ending of the last 3
Vayomahu.
verses or so of Amos.
Yes.
Let's take turn. Is Rosalie there? Or oh, I guess
Oh, I'm here.
yes. Can you read the? Can each of us read just a piece of?
Yeah,
Look at how gorgeous the ending of Amos is. In that day, go ahead.
In that day, I will set up again the fallen Jews of David. I will mend its breaches and set up its ruins anew. I will build it firm as in the days of old, so that they shall possess the rest of Edom and all of the nations once attached to my name. Declares the Lord who will bring this to pass.
Okay, and Yafa, you want to read, or is your throat still bothering you?
Yafa,
Ma,
do you want to sing Vehitifu Ha'arim Asis when we get to it?
yes, Ve'itifu ha'arim asis v'hagva'ot titmokagna. It's a very famous saying. Yes,
Okay.
the mountains will give forth
Yeah, okay, so, all right, let me read this. A time is coming, declares the Lord, when the plowman shall meet the reaper and the treader of grapes, him who holds the bag of seed. When the mountains shall drip wine and all the hills shall wave with grain.
Here it
I
says,
will restore my people Israel. They shall rebuild ruined cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink their wine. They shall till gardens and eat their fruits, and I will plant them upon their soil, never more to be uprooted from the soil I have given them.
I think,
says the Lord your God.
Amen.
Yafa, and I think there's an incorrect right translation, right? Yeah.
That what?
With V'chol Hagva'ot Titmokagna, there's
Okay, by the way, this is all JPS.
That's
the-
okay.
the-
It's okay.
They do make mistakes. Yeah, the Jewish public. It's not my favorite translation. It's the one I get from Safaria. It's the Jewish Public.
that's good.
Publication. So yeah, it's good. The Jewish
JPS
Public-
is always a good standard translation.
Yeah, but it's good that we question these things. So what are you questioning in what we just read? What words?
Noel Yafa, you were going to say something about it, actually.
Say, wait a minute. I don't
Was
know.
there a?
Wait, she's checking it out on 13.
No. I say it's the words of comfort that, and it's true, we survived it all. Oh, I did want to say that we didn't touch it, is that many of the leaders, the kings, whatever, they didn't like him. They wanted him to move out of the country because they couldn't
Yeah.
listen to all the,
Yeah, there's a confrontation with the head priest of Bethel.
right, and they
Amaziah.
wanted him to leave the country, go another place,
Get out of here. No, we know the prophets are without honor in their
That's
own home.
exactly, they were not accepted.
Where do you think we get that phrase? The prophets are with honor in that home. What do we do to our prophets? Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King. All right, look at this. This, by the way, this grabs me into just, I'm not being not stretching here. And all the hills shall wave with grain. This kind of language, that's America the Beautiful.
That's
The amber
right.
wave grain.
Yeah.
There's tremendous influence of the prophets, as you have been saying, all of you, on the language of today. If it doesn't come from Shakespeare, it comes from the Bible, two choices. And the
right.
prophets very much so.
Yep.
Even the little phrase, woe is me, comes from a prophet. Woe is me. It's part of our language. It's rather archaic now. Very common in Shakespeare's day, in Elizabethan English. That's a famous phrase from the prophet. So there's plenty of that. But let me just show you how beautiful. Hold poetically what's going on with the poetry. I exaggerated this a la Robert Alter, Sharon's favorite. This is we just read this, the poetry of consolation and redemption. Okay, the end of Amos. But I want to show you how brilliant this is as poetry.
It is.
Didn't have time. I'm not going to leave Amos without going into my field of study, which is literature and poetry. Look, and I've translated, I've copied Robert Alter on this because he does it to emphasize the poetry.
Yes, that's right.
True to the Hebrew, even more true than almost anyone else that I've ever read, even though I don't know Hebrew. Look, a time is coming, declares the Lord. Here's what we just read. Oh, you're going to go left, right, left, right. That's the Alter way. When the plowman will overtake the reaper, the treader of grapes, the sower.
But
mountain-
Kotzer is also a harvester, somebody who will harvest. It's not only.
Yeah, let me get out that reading. When the plow, it's very eloquent. When the plowman will overtake the reaper, the treader of grapes, the sower, the mountains will drip wine, and all the hills will melt. There's a lot in there.
Yep.
First of all, do you see the basic structure, and it's in narrative too, but it's definitely in the poetry. The basic structure over again is this parallel structure. One line. He's taken one line, verse 13, and turned it into 4 or 3. Sorry, 2, because he wants to emphasize the parallel structure. When the plowman will overtake the reaper, now we get an apparent opposite. No, not exactly. The treader of grapes, the sower. What do you see? What happened between? See, it's parallel structure, parallelism to extent, but it's not synonymous. It's not equivalent. What happens with the plowman? Just focus on plowman and reaper. Plowman is first, reaper is second on the left. What's the order on the right? Because this is a great poet. He's not going to give you the same order. He's too great for that.
Great.
Plowman, 1, reaper, 2. Give me the label, do tender of grapes and sower. You know it. Treader of grapes and sower. See what's happening? Yeah, it's a reversal. So when the plowman will overtake the reaper, and then the reaper becomes the treader of grapes, a beautiful phrase, and the plowman becomes the sower. When the plowman will overtake the reaper and the treader of grapes, the sower, this has such an amazing effect because it doesn't mean overtake, cast out. It's not bad, but the plowman, the reaper can't go fast enough. It's such a time of abundance and a vision and an incredible vision, a new order of reality. It's utopian. It's all harmonious. It's a new promised land, an Edenic paradise. It's a messianic vision. This is not the day of doom. This is the day of the messianic vision.
And you plant a land, and then you'll never leave it. That's
yeah. And look at the treader of grapes, the sower. There's an idea here that the sower can't. the reaper is not even done before the sower is at hand. It's such a time of abundance and wealth, and it's a new world order. So there's a day of doom, an apocalyptic vision, but you've got to get this straight, and it's proper that it ends almost ends with it. There's a messianic vision. This is messianic because it's paradise. Now, the mountains will drip wine and all the hills will melt. That's not so easy.
The
First
main
of all,
thing here-
it's metaphor.
Yeah, but-
Mountains don't really drip wine, but it's the seeming abundance of the grapes, and the wine is just going to overflow. What about in all the hills will melt?
Now, wait a
I've
minute,
seen- I've seen the word.
Jonathan,
Yeah, go ahead.
the main thing that you didn't put is the prophecy is that I will plant them on the land and they'll never leave it because
Well-
this will be the land. I don't know. I hope so. Nobody will ever take away the land. That's the main prophecy.
Yeah. This is, by the way, the covenant. This is the contrast to the conditional covenant of Sinai. This is the covenant. This is the eternal covenant, the gift.
It's our
It's
team.
non-conditional. It's the eternal covenant. It's the gift. It's the grant. You will never be displaced. You're not a leaser and a renter, right? Because if you're a leaser and a
God
renter,
gave
you
you
could be,
this land.
wait a minute,
Yeah.
wait a minute. If you're not a leaser and a renter where you can be cast off, you're the owner. You've
Right.
got ownership of that land. Yeah, that was there in what we read. But what about in all the hills will melt?
That's the most powerful statement.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That has to work metaphorically, but it has to work on a naturalistic nature level. These poets are too great to just concoct something that's not working literally and figuratively.
Well, he's talking about planting, Amos is talking about planting, sowing, reaping.
But what's-
Because all their visions,
But
yeah, because all
over-
their visions were agricultural terms.
yeah,
That's the society they lived in. So all the words that has to do with agriculture.
yeah, and
Yes, but I
and then
want to focus
God
on,
plants them in the land, just like they plant the seeds of the fruit. God is, and they will reap abundance. And it will happen because God is planting them in their land.
Right.
right, but I'm the reason I'm focusing in on melt is because melt is often used in a doomsday vision.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, because melting is like it's like lava. It's like the hills, mountains and hills is often a doomsday vision. This is how clever this poet is. It's a doomsday vision he's turned around. Melt can often be an earthquake, a lava, an eruption, a horror. Here it's used as paradise. So what meaning of melt do we get from it? What is apparently the hills melting signify? Since it's not doom, it's paradise.
But
What
I
would
want
the
to say
melt be?
something. But
Hey,
the
wait a
word,
second. Take your grapes, take your wine. What's melting?
the words that they use, the kol hagbaot litmogeg is also like full of joy, to melt out of joy.
To
Good.
what? Out of joy?
Melt out of
Melt out
joy.
of joy.
Use it in everyday language.
Okay.
Oh, אני מתמוגגת מנחת. I'm melting out of joy.
And presumably the hills are melting with overflowing wine.
Right,
The
so they are melting
overflowing
out of joy,
abundance.
like joy.
Yeah, but it has to work literally too, Yaffa. It does. It works with the overflowing of wine, the abundance, and it's metaphorical as well. It's just seemingly so simple, but very, very beautiful, very deep. And that's
prophecy.
all there, I think, and I call it the poetry of consolation, redemption,
It is.
or a messianic vision. It's harmonious, it's lasting, it's eternal, as
Beautiful.
Jaffa says. It's a new promised land. And Israel will never lose ownership of it. You
Because
see-
God,
Go
What?
ahead.
God gave it to them.
Yeah, God gave it to them, but God but there's two kinds of covenants. In one covenant between God and the people, Israel can lose it if they don't obey, if they don't amend, if they don't repent. But here, it seems like a different kind of covenant. It's an eternal gift and grant. Of course, presumably, to get to here at the end of Amos,
It's sort of unconditional. It's
they
uncon-
have repented.
Well,
It's
yeah,
not conditional at all. It's conditional on
Again,
the
it's
believing
unconditional.
properly.
What's that?
It's unconditional.
Yeah, here it's unconditional. I'm saying there's a covenant that's conditional upon man obeying God. That's the covenant of Sinai and the commandments and the laws, right? You have to obey the laws. This seems to be, they're two Brits, two covenants that collide and sometimes meld together and sometimes are tense. There's a tension between them in Judaism. I'm calling it the covenant of Sinai, the covenant that you've got to obey the laws versus the eternal covenant. It's I'm trying to use a metaphor here. You're a renter and a leaser in the one. You could lose it. You could
yeah.
lose it. Here, you're not going to lose it. It's eternal.
I'm thinking that the prophet is Amos is the superego, and he presents all these
Visions.
curses, you could say,
Curses.
curses are manifestations of the superego. So he's not letting his demons beat down his better angels. He is representing the better angels. But again, what I brought up before about correlation between what one may infer from all those awful words, right, to the people. I think that's just rantings of the not rantings, I'm sorry.
Ravings.
No. I think, he's just trying to say, guys, just remember what your better angels represent. Just remember that you do have better angels and they represent something. So while you're living the life, all right, keep in mind this. That's how I see it. I need to see it like that, because otherwise I see this God who's like angry at us all the time. And I have to reject that. I think it's just man's language. Yeah.
Okay.
I really like
Meredith,
Sharon's take
last
on
word,
that.
Meredith.
I say I really like Sharon's take on that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
We
you.
see it, we see it, no matter the scales that we have, we see it weighing towards man's humanity, towards mercy, compassion.
Right. If you're going to, if people are going to just consume and consume while others are going hungry, then the whole deal is off in terms of the covenant.
Right. In terms of the covenant that, the covenant in which it's called the covenant of mutual responsibility, really, where God has to do his part to the people and man has to do his part
Yeah.
to God.
Like a mutual contractual agreement.
Yes,
Right. It's
but
not
there is,
just an entitlement.
what's that?
It's not just an entitlement.
No. It's not chosenness or entitlement, no. There are two covenants at play, and I invite you to my class, my discussion next week, and that will play on the two covenantal views, in part, of Isaiah versus Jeremiah. And there's a great, this is a really good lecture you should hear. It will be on your, I will make sure you have it again, but you can go to Scholar Stream and you can hear Rabbi Ben Summer. I don't know him, but he did a great job on discussing the differing views on covenant, and therefore the differing views on the survival of Israel and the survival of Jerusalem. Isaiah says one thing, Jeremiah says another.
Jeremiah was,
Can you guess where they, can you guess where the, yeah, can you
Yeah.
guess where they stand?
Yeah, a Jeremiah, it's coming to English, a Jeremiah, so that's
Yeah, yeah.
gloom and doom, yeah.
Yeah,
This is
he's
very
now,
depressing.
but it's not one-sided, and we're not going to talk, it's not totally one-sided.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we'll be happy with Jeremiah. Too.
I have to go.
Yeah, and
So-
Janet, I want to
so-
say that unfortunately, Marty and I won't be able to attend. We are going to be off to Boston for the Passover holiday.
Well,
That's
it's
right.
more important, that's great, but it's more important you hear the professor, if you can, Ben Summers on this, a dual covenant idea,
When
and
is it?
Jeremiah versus Isaiah. You'll enjoy it particularly.
Okay, so that will be asynchronous to you. You're just going to send all of us the link.
Yes, I'll send it to you. It occurs, it already occurred last night. And 8 days later, next week, I discuss it. And and you all will enjoy listening to that. It's very articulately done. If you're listening, want to listen to, if you have a choice between Ben Summer and Jonathan Weil, listen to Ben Summer, please. It's fantastic. Okay, I have many other things to show you, but we'll wrap it up here. We didn't quite get to enough poetry. But the next discussion will be on the dual covenantal view and what Isaiah says about the lastingness of Judaism and Israel and Jerusalem versus Jeremiah. And then the very last one, they're not sticking to the text exactly. They're going into the writings. Lamentations will be the final text, which is a lamentation over the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, the first temple, that is, not the second temple. It's not written by Jeremiah, that's wrong.
But they think it was.
But he's associated with it.
Right.
But it's probably written by a number of people. But so that will be the fourth, Lamentations, which is not per se a prophet writing. It's from the Ketuvim, the final section of Tanakh.
Okay.
So great. I really enjoyed this. I leave you with one final thought, and maybe I will look at it next week with you. This is the first line of Lamentations. Lonely sits the city. Lonely sits the city. In the JPS translation, Jewish Publication Society.
Echa, in Hebrew, it's called Echa.
Yeah, Echa. Also because,
We do it on Tisha B'Av, we read it on Tisha
yeah,
B'Av.
and it's read as a Megillah during Tisha B'Av, the
Right.
destruction of both temples and other destructions and horrors in Israeli life. But lonely sits the city. I leave you with this challenge. Is that poetry or prose?
What do you mean?
And I'm making a big deal. I'm making a big deal. I found a line that was the simplest possible line I could find, 4 little simple words. And I will tell you the answer. That's great poetry. That is not prose. Lamentations is all poetry. and you could miss it. And you won't miss it if I give you, well, if I let you translate into the prose, lonely sits the city. What does that, give me a translation of that. What does the poet mean? I mean, kill it by translating it into awful prose. Somebody, please.
Okay, into awful prose?
Yes.
Okay,
Prose by definition is going to kill it because you're going to give me a paraphrase, a prose meaning, a paraphrase of meaning.
The city sits lonely.
What's that?
The city sits lonely.
Well, yes, that one of the reversals is, yes, that one of the things that makes it more poetic, reversing it. The city sits lonely, but let's go further than that. Sits is metaphorical. Cities are not lonely and cities don't sit. So give me translations, pathetic, no translations, paraphrases of lonely and sit. And then you tell me the city.
Is isolated.
There, fine. The city is isolated. The city is, here's some of my translations. The city is without inhabitants, people. The city has no inhabitants. The city is devoid of people. That is, and believe it or not, we have translations, not of Lamentations, but we have translations of the Bible that are that bad. That's prose. That's prose. This is poetry, and it's poetry for so many reasons. One, the reversal of the word order, and we'll look at some of the other reasons next time. I think we'll start with that because it's metaphor, it's reversal, it's got incredible alliteration. Lonely, city, sits, city. It's symbolic. It takes you not to just one city. This is the city of Jerusalem. It could really be all cities if you said lonely sits a city, but lonely sits the city. It does point to Jerusalem, to Zion, but it does point outward to, something that's more universal and more timeless. Whereas there's no way this is universal and timeless. The city is without inhabitants, people. That's the Ukraine now. That's a city in the Ukraine. That's journalistic reporting. That's prose. So I make a big deal about that because
You see it tonight.
failures in translation, but failures to really recognize the poetry and eloquence often of the Bible. Final word, Yafa.
No, I say it, you're so right. When you look at Ukraine, it's Echaya Shva Badad, exactly.
Yeah, and I will give you another one here. I know I'm going too late now.
Yes.
She sits, here's a translation, there's the Hebrew. I put the Hebrew down because that's beautiful too, but another translation, is she sits in solitude. She sits in solitude isn't terrible. Sits in solitude are very alliterative. And she is standing for the city because Israel, as is Jerusalem, is often personified as a she. And so that's poetic too. And look what happens, because it's going to be, the city has become like a widow, if you read 3 lines. So, so that's not a terrible.
Jonathan,
Yes.
in Hebrew, a city is feminine, so it has to do with the language.
Yeah. Well, no, you mean Yashva is feminine, right? The
But
feminine carries on the verb.
In Hebrew, the word city is feminine.
But
it's
also,
like Alma, widow.
The city is feminine, so everything about the city will be feminine. Yashva, Nafla. So
right.
The language too.
Exactly the
Yafa.
language.
Okay,
And-
I have a question. Jonathan, Yafa, the word vadat, as it's written, would that be
Yes.
why isn't that feminine?
No, but no. It,
Yes,
no.
because it's an ad.
Yeah, but I hear Yashva, the city said feminine, then,
Yeah.
but that is a description, it's an adjective, so.
So that's why we could just call this, like Jonathan was getting, Vadad and,
Yeah, that's the correct, yeah,
but I
yeah,
was getting it, yeah.
yeah, the solitude, the adverbial.
Yeah.
does-
To me,
The city
to me,
sits
it's also
out.
lonely, it's
The
lonely.
adverbial doesn't carry feminine and masculine in Hebrew, does it? No.
No,
I say-
And
But that is
now,
also lonely, hello? It's also lonely, very lonely.
yeah, we end here because this is the King James Version, which is not always good. It's
Right.
fair. It's not great here, it's fair. Here's the King James Version. How lonely sits the city that was full of people. Full of people, they turn it, the second line. If you look here, once great with people, they put the two lines together. That's okay, but it's a little bit more prosaic. It's a little bit less, it's not terrible, but how lonely sits the city that was full of people is not quite as powerful, I think, as lonely sits the city.
Yeah, but you know what? Echa means how.
yeah,
So that's why it's either one.
Yeah, well, that's
How
also
lonely
because
or
Eha,
was lonely.
Eha, the beginning of the word for Lamentations is how, yes.
Right.
but can you translate that at all as like alas?
No.
No, I left out that line. That's there.
Oh,
Ika,
yes.
Aka, yeah,
No.
that's above it. And that is a good word, right?
But
Alas,
Yaffa said you can't translate it
No,
like.
Echa is a city, but Ech is how. Echa is how could it happen? It comes
yeah.
from the word Ech.
Ah.
Ech means how.
I know, but alas isn't a terrible translation of that. It's, it's a cry of woe and,
I know
oh my
both.
God.
Right. It can
All
be
right.
right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
I
Shavuot.
will.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Jonathan.
Thank you, Happy and Meredith and Rosalind.
Very much.
Please come back.